But you're setting him up for failure if you don't give him all the information, aren't you?
Couldn't give him information that was from a closed session. Or a mediation, closed mediation.
Well, as it turns out, the discussion of the 70% rule was not in any closed session. Sarah Nolan heard about it back in December. You never told Mark about it, did you?
I don't know if I even knew that in December.
Yeah, but that wasn't something that was confidentially determined in closed session if it was known by Sarah.
We never talked about it before, and if it was known in December, I don't recall ever having that discussion with him or anyone else about that rule.
Yeah. But you knew about it
Oh, boy.
at some point.
I may have known about it, but didn't think much of it at that point.
Okay? And why not?
I didn't know that much about the case until, really that much about the case until April, late March.
Wasn't one of the benchmarks that you used to determine whether Mark was complying with your instructions was whether or not the ALS percentage was going down for Clinton Fire Department billing?
That was one of the things we looked at.
That was the only thing you looked at, wasn't it?
I don't. We certainly paid a lot of attention to it.
Yeah. In fact, you told me that that's how you knew that Mark was not implementing your instructions.
We looked at, see what the numbers were, we just took a sampling of the numbers and they weren't going down to those levels.
Yeah, but you never told Mark what you expected the number to be. And you never told him why you expected that number to be lower.
Yeah, I, once again, just didn't want to get into what could have been, confidential discussions.
You said that Mark and Andy didn't take Tim Schulteis seriously. What investigation did you conduct to make that determination?
We checked and no response had come from the original complaint. There was no response at all to it. That's basically that. There was nothing done at the time.
Wasn't it the fact that the percentage of ALS calls didn't change, so you assumed they did nothing?
I wouldn't say I assumed they did nothing, but it just wasn't down to what we thought it should be.
But you did not go into the fire department and talk to anybody, any of the other command officers, and ask what they did in response to the Schulteis complaint?
No.
You didn't talk to Andy about what he did in response to the Schulteis complaint? No?
No.
You didn't talk to Mark about what he did in response to the Schulteis complaint? Did you?
No, I didn't really talk about it. Once I really started to find out more about the case, a lot of it I couldn't even share with him at that point. That was just the unfortunate nature of the timing of me coming into the event.
And Mark was also under constraints of confidentiality because Mike Walker had instructed him that what they talked about and what he knew about the case wasn't to go outside the room. Wasn't that true?
I don't know about that. I wasn't in it.
The city stopped billing altogether in August of 2010, didn't they?
Correct.
That was after Mark and Andy were placed on administrative leave.
Correct.
Because the other firemen didn't want to touch it.
I don't know about that.
They didn't know what to do differently.
We wanted to make sure that our process was right, so we stopped it then until we felt we were comfortable to get it going again.
You talked to somebody about a 70% rule. Mike Brown and Joel Atkinson, right?
After the fact that it did come out, yes.
Both of them said, I don't know how to achieve a 70% target, right?
They said that they needed help.
Yeah. They needed to build the calls based on what they saw and what they were dispatched for, and they couldn't shoot for any kind of a 70% target. Right?
We wanted to be sure that we're done correctly.
And if you wanted them to shoot for a target, they wanted that in writing.
They never asked me for anything in writing.
And the way you solved the problem was to actually go ahead and hire an outside company to do the billing.
The council approved, the council, we looked at some, examined and brought a proposal to the council if we took RFPs.
Which is exactly what you and Mark were talking about before putting him on administrative leave.
Yeah.
You never told Mark to have an audit done.
No.
Probably wasn't a prudent expenditure of money since you were already spending a large sum of money on Mr. Wolfberg and Mr. Walker and his staff.
Yes, we were.
So you were getting that information, but you couldn't share it with Mark.
Right.
When you talked with Paul Walter about this case, he didn't lead you to believe that it was anything significant, did he?
No, Paul and I had very little discussion on this case, but cursory.
He thought it was a case filed by a disgruntled employee with an axe to grind, didn't he?
That I'm not sure of.
Mark has always had outstanding, at least above average evaluations. Both as a firefighter, he started at the bottom and worked his way up to chief over 30 years. And his evaluations have always been at least above average and often exemplary, wouldn't you agree?
I don't disagree.
He's been evaluated by your predecessors, Gary Bowden and Jeff Koistra, and they all evaluated him highly.
I believe that's the case.
There was an evaluation by Gary Bowden done in 2008, June 2nd of 2008. It's Exhibit R5. Page 2. And down at the bottom, Mr. Show it to you. What did Mr. Bowden have to say about Mark?
You wrote here, probably our best department director.
Yeah, sure is. I didn't hear that very well. I didn't hear that very well. Is that Exhibit R5?
Exhibit R5, page 4 of the second page of Gary Bowden's evaluation. He said Mark was probably our best department director. Mr. Horn, you're not sure if the procedure code that's put on by the paramedic personnel is the same as the billing code that's used that's sent to Medicare.
That's correct, I'm not sure.
The mediation that you attended, that wasn't a hearing, was it?
No.
That was a discussion to see if the case could be settled.
That would be, yeah.
And once you heard that the potential downside to the case might be $20 or $30 million, how'd you react to that?
I was very concerned
And why?
because the city would be looking at bankruptcy.
So once you heard the possibility of $30 million, you were looking for a way to get this case settled because you were afraid that would bankrupt the city.
That's correct.
And at the mediation session, there was really no debate about the merits of the case, only about the damages, right?
That's right.
You didn't ask Mark to sit in on the mediation,
I didn't personally, no.
even though he's the department head whose head is now on the block because of the settlement. You didn't think it was important to have his input on whether or not the city ought to settle this case.
Andrew was involved in it, so we had some representation from there. He was the person that knew more about it, and we felt he would be more important to have at the mediation.
In fact, Mark was on vacation when the mediation session was held. Is that correct?
That could be.
Did Mark have any idea that the city was thinking about settling this case for $4.5 million before you and he talked about him having to either resign or be fired?
No.
Did you think it might be prudent to ask him what he thought about a settlement of $4.5 million before the city went ahead and did it?
I would like to have, and I felt I could.
After all, he'd been in the fire department for over 30 years and knew all the guys in the fire department and knew the people that you could talk to get information if you needed to. But he was left out of the loop.
That's right.
Now, you've talked about the responsibility of a supervisor for a person to whom he delegates authority. That's basically what you're talking about with Mark. He's the guy, he was relying on Andy and delegated authority, but he didn't follow up. Correct?
And what, I guess I'm not understanding, sure, yeah.
That Mark delegated authority
Yeah.
to Andy, but that he, once having delegated that authority, did not take an active role
Right.
in following up.
Yes.
And yet, what was your follow-up after asking Mark to make sure that Medicare coding and billing was properly done?
We would have had it at the next evaluation, I would have re-examined it again to see if there's progress been made.
Next evaluation never happened.
Right.
You
At the
didn't,
time of that evaluation, I didn't know that that was gonna be the end result.
you didn't know that Mark had done the ambulance study. You did know that he went to St. Louis. You didn't know
I
about.
knew he went to St. Louis.
I say you did know that he went to St. Louis. You did not know about the policy changes that were made in the fire department. You did not know about the classes that were taught by Kip Ireland.
I didn't know about his classes now.
Were those things that would be important to know if you were following up on the directive?
Yeah, if we would have gotten to that point again, yes.
The difference between an ALS level call and a BLS level call is $45, is that your understanding?
That's my understanding.
So what we're talking about here on an individual call is 45 bucks.
Yes, that's fine.
If you're upgrading a BLS to an ALS, you're talking about 45 bucks.
In the reimbursement rate, correct.
Did you make any determination as to how much Medicare may have been overbilled if the allegations were correct in the lawsuit?
No, we were looking more at the damages. We never ran a direct difference.
didn't you think it was important to know how much was involved in terms of
Well, we
the
knew
alleged
it.
overbill?
We knew it was less considerably. I mean, we knew it was, the fine was gonna be by far larger than the difference was.
Did the city's legal department have any role in determining whether the city was in compliance with Medicare billing rules and regulations?
Since I've been here, no. We've only had three, I've worked with 3 attorneys since I've been here, 13 months.
Do you think they should have some responsibility in reviewing laws and regulations that affect